It was the summer of 1998 when Erica Johnson, a 22-year-old college student from Wisconsin, decided to take a road trip with her two friends, Mike and Sophie. They were headed toward Lake Superior, chasing adventure and a break from city life. Instead of taking the main highway, Mike suggested a shortcut he had read about in an old hunting magazine, an isolated dirt road that cut through the dense northern forests. Locals, he claimed, had once used it to reach abandoned logging camps. They drove for hours, the road growing narrower, trees closing in like walls, their cell phones losing signal until they were useless. The forest felt ancient, dark even in daylight and eerily silent. By dusk, their car sputtered and died. No gas station, no houses, nothing, only woods. That was when they spotted it. A wooden sign, barely visible under moss and vines. Miller's Cabin, 2 miles. Desperate for shelter, they followed the path. The cabin looked like something pulled out of a nightmare. Its wood was blackened with age, windows cracked, roof sagging under years of neglect. Yet, strangely, there was smoke curling from the stone chimney. Someone was living there. An old man answered the door. His eyes were pale, almost white, and his smile seemed forced, stretched too wide. He introduced himself as Mr. Miller, claiming his family had lived there for generations. Against their better judgment, the trio accepted his invitation to stay the night. Inside, the air was thick with a metallic smell, like rust or blood. The walls were lined with animal skulls, jars of preserved meat, and photographs of hunters posing with kills. But one photo caught Erica's attention. It showed 3 young people, 2 women and a man, standing in front of the very same cabin. The photo was dated 1979. The problem? The people in the photo looked almost exactly like Erica, Mike, and Sophie. That night, Erica woke to whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the voices were inside the cabin. She followed the sound to a locked door at the end of the hall. Peering through the keyhole, she saw movement. Dozens of eyes stared back at her. Not reflections. Eyes. Human eyes. Suddenly, the old man's voice came from behind her. "You shouldn't be here." He grabbed her wrist with unnatural strength. His nails were black, jagged. Erica screamed, waking Mike and Sophie. In the chaos, Miller disappeared into the woods, leaving the door unlocked. When they opened it, what they found would haunt them forever. The room was a basement, walls covered with scratch marks. Chains dangled from the ceiling. A table in the center held surgical tools coated in dried blood. And the smell, rot, decay, death. In the corner, they found piles of clothing. Women's dresses, men's jackets, children's shoes. Some fresh, some decades old. Mike picked up a torn backpack. Inside was a driver's license, belonging to a girl reported missing in 1983. Then Sophie noticed the far wall. It was covered in Polaroids, each showing terrified people bound in the very same basement. The last Polaroid was dated 2 weeks ago. The faces in it were strangers, but an empty Polaroid was taped next to it, with 3 names written in red ink. Erica, Mike, Sophie. Panic set in. They rushed back upstairs only to find the cabin doors locked from the outside. Miller was back. The sound of chains dragging across the porch filled the night. Mike tried breaking a window, slicing his hand open on glass, but they managed to crawl out. They ran into the forest, branches tearing at their skin, their lungs burning. Behind them, Miller's voice echoed, "You belong here, just like the others." Hours felt like days as they stumbled through the forest, guided only by moonlight. Finally, they burst onto an old dirt road just as a truck approached. The driver, a local logger, took one look at their bloody, terrified faces and drove them straight to the nearest police station. Police searched Miller's cabin the next morning. It was gone. Not burned down, not collapsed, gone. Only a clearing remained, as though nothing had ever stood there. But the strangest part? Officers recognized the names on the license Mike had found. They belonged to real missing persons whose cases had never been solved. When shown the Polaroids Erica had taken with her, police confirmed several faces matched missing people from as far back as the 1960s. But the last photo, the one with their names, was missing. To this day, no one knows what Miller was, or how the cabin could vanish overnight. Locals claim it appears once every 20 years, drawing in travelers who are never seen again. Epilogue. Erica, Mike, and Sophie never spoke publicly about what happened. But years later, in 2019, a hiker reported seeing smoke in the forest, rising from where the cabin once stood. The sign was back to Miller's Cabin 2 miles. And this time, 3 college students went missing. In 2004, Rachel Matthews, a 25-year-old nurse, moved into a small apartment complex in Cleveland, Ohio. She had recently broken off an engagement and wanted a fresh start. Somewhere quiet, affordable, and close to the hospital where she worked night shifts. The building was old but charming. Brick walls, creaky wooden stairs, and only 6 units. Rachel's place was apartment 6B, the last one at the end of the hall. Across from her lived a girl she would often hear but rarely see. Apartment 6A. At first, Rachel thought nothing of it. She would hear faint humming through the walls, sometimes soft laughter, sometimes crying. The sounds were unsettling, but in an old building, noise traveled strangely. Until one night, after coming home from a late shift, Rachel found something odd. A Polaroid picture had been slipped under her door. It was of her, sleeping in her bed. The next morning, Rachel knocked on 6's door. It opened just a crack. A young woman stood there, maybe 20 or 21, with tangled hair and pale skin. She introduced herself as Lena. Her voice was shaky, her eyes wide, like she hadn't slept in days. Rachel asked if she had slipped the photo under her door. Lena just smiled and whispered, "He watches us when we sleep." Then she shut the door. Rachel tried brushing it off. Maybe Lena was mentally unstable, maybe she was lonely. But over the next few weeks, the strange things escalated. Polaroids kept appearing, always of Rachel. Some of her in the kitchen, brushing her hair, or unlocking her door. All taken when she was alone. Worse, sometimes Rachel would wake at night and swear she saw shadows moving at the foot of her bed. One evening, police cars swarmed the building. Rachel came home to find officers banging on 6's door. They forced it open. Inside, the apartment was nearly empty. No furniture, no clothes, just dozens of Polaroid photos covering the walls. Every single one was of Rachel. Some were from inside her apartment, angles she couldn't explain. But the most disturbing ones were of her sleeping, taken from mere inches away. Rachel asked the officers about Lena. They looked at her confused. There hasn't been a tenant in 6A for over 5 years. The unit's been vacant since 1999. Rachel protested, saying she had spoken to Lena many times. The police dismissed it, suggesting maybe someone had broken into the empty apartment and used it as a hideout. But Rachel knew what she saw. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She double-locked her door, shoved a chair under the knob, and left the lights on. At 3:17 a.m., the humming started again. The same soft voice she had heard for weeks, drifting through the wall. Terrified, Rachel pressed her ear against it. The voice whispered, "Look behind you." Her heart froze. She turned slowly and saw the figure of Lena, standing in the corner of her bedroom, pale eyes glowing in the dim light. Lena raised a Polaroid camera and clicked. The flash blinded Rachel. When her vision cleared, the girl was gone. The next morning, Rachel packed her things and fled the building. She told the landlord everything. He swore apartment 6A had been empty for years. Curious, Rachel asked about the last tenant. The landlord hesitated before admitting the truth. In 1999, a girl named Lena Crawford had lived there. She was quiet, troubled, often reported seeing a man watching her through the walls. One night, she vanished. Police later discovered her body inside the building's basement, locked in a storage room. She had been dead for weeks before anyone found her. The case was never solved. Her apartment 6A was never rented again. Epilogue. Rachel never returned to the building. She moved states, changed jobs, and tried to forget. But 6 months later, a package arrived at her new address. No return label. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was of Rachel, sleeping in her new apartment. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. On the outskirts of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, the town's crooked streets were drowned in fog. Street lamps glowed faintly against the mist, but their light could not pierce through the dense veil that hung over the town. For most, the fog was simply weather, unpleasant but nothing more. For Ethan Miller, however, it was a sign. He sat hunched at his desk in a cramped Boston apartment, flipping through a set of yellowed files he had stolen years ago. They were labeled in faded type, Blackthorn State Hospital Patient Records. The asylum had been shut down in the late 1970s after a series of unexplained deaths, patient disappearances, and whispers of illegal experiments. For decades it rotted on a hill outside Willow Creek, its windows bricked, its corridors silent. No one was supposed to enter, yet stories persisted of lights moving in the night, of voices carried on the wind. Ethan had grown up hearing those stories. But he also had another reason to care. His mother had been one of Blackthorn's last patients. She disappeared when he was 8. The official report claimed she was transferred before the asylum closed, but no hospital had records of her ever arriving. Now, 30 years later, Ethan finally had something concrete. An anonymous email. It read only, "If you want answers about your mother, come to Blackthorn. Midnight. Tomorrow." No sender. No signature. Just a time, a place. When Ethan arrived at Willow Creek the following night, he wasn't alone. 3 other figures waited near the rusting iron gates of Blackthorn. Lena Carter, a thrill-seeking urban explorer who ran a small but loyal YouTube channel dedicated to abandoned places. She carried a heavy-duty flashlight and a camera strapped to her chest. Marcus Hale, a former police officer turned private investigator, whose younger brother had once worked maintenance at Blackthorn before vanishing in 1976. Chloe Reyes, a graduate student in parapsychology at MIT, who claimed to be researching psychic residue in old institutions. They all had their reasons, but none fully trusted the others. The asylum loomed before them, a hulking, 6-story mass of cracked stone and broken windows, its sign barely visible. Blackthorn State Hospital. The gates groaned as Marcus forced them open. "Last chance to turn back," he muttered. No one moved. The 4 entered. In 2008, retired Detective Alan Brooks took an interest in the case. He visited Raven Road at night, documenting everything with a handheld camcorder. For the first 40 minutes, nothing happened. Just darkness, the hum of cicadas, headlights cutting through fog. Then, at 3:07 a.m., Brooks recorded something he couldn't explain. A figure walked across the road, just at the edge of his headlights. A young woman in a torn white dress. Brooks called out, "Melissa!" The figure stopped. Slowly, her head turned toward the camera. Her face was blank. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin. The camcorder dropped, and the footage ended. Brooks was found the next morning, unconscious in his car. His fingernails were torn, as if he'd been clawing at the steering wheel. He never spoke about what he SAW. In 2011, construction crews began widening part of Raven Road. While digging, they unearthed something buried beneath the trees. A shallow grave. Inside were bones, 3 different people. None of them Melissa. Among the remains was a Polaroid camera. Inside the camera was one undeveloped photo. When processed, the picture showed the inside of a car. The dashboard, the rearview mirror, and in the back seat, a terrified Melissa Turner. The photo was dated June 14, 1997, the exact night she vanished. Epilogue. To this day, Melissa Turner has never been found. Drivers still avoid Raven Road at night. Those who dare say the same thing: if you drive too slow, you'll see her standing by the roadside. If you stop, she'll try to get in your car. But if you let her in, you won't make it out. Because it's not Melissa anymore. It's the thing that took her. And it's still waiting on Raven Road.